Well, we're here with the absolute rugby league legend that is Tony Smith. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Tony, for joining us.
My
And
pleasure.
and we're going to dive straight into your childhood. Talk us through your childhood, you being brought up over there in New South Wales, and how you got into rugby league.
Yeah, well, it was a long time ago, a bit over 58 years ago now. It all started over there. Yeah, I was brought up up until the age of eight, probably. I was brought up in a little town, a country town in New South Wales called Casino. Not much there except a whole lot of um, beef cattle farms and dairy farms all around. And at the age of eight, my parents bought a dairy farm, a small dairy farm outside of Casino. So we moved out to that, and I was raised until I left school on a dairy farm, hardworking dairy farmers. And I had three brothers and two brothers and one sister, all quite a bit older than me. I'm the youngest in the family by 10 years. So my older brothers were both rugby league players. They played for their local teams, and then my oldest brother Brian, he went off just as I was starting school. He was finishing school, and he went off to Sydney to play for his first team was St George Dragons, and then yeah, I sort of tried to follow in his footsteps, I suppose, throughout school, and was always into all sports, but rugby league and cricket were my two passions. And I was slightly better at rugby league than what I was at cricket. But yeah, it was a great upbringing. I had and with two brothers and an elder sister. And two very loving parents that were hardworking. They instilled a lot of very good values into me. The reason I mentioned that about my brothers and sisters, whilst my parents were working hard, I had these older siblings taking care of me, and they did a pretty good job of that. You know, they instilled some pretty good values into me.
Fair enough. And yeah, what were one of your main key values that you took from that then?
Well, I'm going to say to you, Ben, when you're good at sport, it's easy to be popular amongst your pals and and other kids within the school environment. And yeah, it gives you that popularity you can use in a good way or a bad way. It's almost like a bit powerful in some respects, and when you're growing up, you're a bit confused how to use that at different stages. But because of the way I was brought up by my parents, but then by my brothers and sisters always looking out for me, they helped me understand to use that popularity in a good way most of the time. I'd make some errors myself, and they'd point them out to me. And I think also being part of sport and within a team environment, you learn a lot of principles about treating your teammates well and being respectful and handling defeat when you in the right manners. And I think they instilled a lot of very, very good values, such as being humble and being down to earth and not getting too far ahead of yourself. Pardon me. Because at that point in time, I was quite good at rugby league in particular, and I'd say throughout my junior career and early part of my life, I was a big fish in a very, very small pond. And later on, when I did head off to the big smoke and of Sydney to play in and hopefully fulfill my boyhood dream of playing in the NRL. It was called the ARL back then. I soon learnt that I was a very small fish in a very big pond once I got to Sydney. So, some of the values that they instilled into me helped me for my later career.
Mm. Obviously, before you get to that big pond in Sydney, you're in New South Wales, and we know, I mean, it's even big over here. I can't imagine over there, the state of origin region there. You've got that rivalry. I mean, how big is it over there? That is it ingrained with you from young?
Oh yeah. I was brought up probably about an hour and a half south of Brisbane, so I wasn't far from the Queensland border, but I was in New South Wales. But because of that fact, I'm always a blue. I'm always a New South Wales supporter. But the rivalry, it's quite interesting actually. There's a bit of history in it. Um, Prior to State of Origin, there always used to be interstate games, and it was between New South Wales and Queensland. Now, the best competition in the world was only in Sydney, only Sydney teams originally. So anybody from Queensland used to go down and play for in Sydney, and then they would represent New South Wales. So New South Wales used to smash Queensland all the time, up until I was, whatever age it was when State of Origin came in, probably in my teens. New South Wales used to just thrash them. So when it went to State of Origin and the Queenslanders could actually represent their own state and their original state, that's when the magic started to happen and the rivalry started to get really juicy, because Queensland had suffered so many defeats for so many years. And that's where the passion really comes from, because they used to get trounced and now they don't, and so they've always had a really strong spirit, the Queenslanders, and, hence anybody who follows the State of Origin, that famous call of Queenslander, it's quite powerful and it's a bit of revenge almost. So that's what made State of Origin so special, I suppose.
So yeah, we all know the Blues won last year, so that's the most important thing.
Yeah, well, it was for me. I've suffered a number of defeats over the years, Ben, but the Blues finally got their act together for a while.
Yeah, well, I'm a Blue myself, so
Good man.
yeah. You then joined St George, and you had your brother's team as well. Was that your team growing up, or?
Yeah, funny one. My first team was actually Illawarra Steelers, which is where he was coaching. However, I tried to go to Penrith. When I left school, I joined the ANZ Bank in Australia. So back in those days, it wasn't a full-time profession. It was a profession, you got paid to do it, but it wasn't full-time. So just about everybody had jobs as well as play rugby league. And I actually was coached by he's a bit of a legend in the Leeds area, and he's passed away now, but a coach by the name of Graham Murray. And most Leeds Rhino fans will remember Graham with fond memories. And Graham actually came up to not casino itself, but a nearby town called Lismore Workers Club, and he was captain coach. And I had the pleasure of playing with Graham, and he took me under his wing and looked after me, and he actually left there to go to Penrith Panthers as under 23s coach. And I tried to get a transfer with work to follow him to Penrith. And anyway, I couldn't get a transfer. So my brother was at Illawarra, and he said, "Why don't you try Wollongong or Illawarra, area?" And I was lucky enough to get a transfer from work down to Illawarra. So I joined up, and my brother was coaching there. So yeah, that was part of my journey. And then a few years later, you're right, about 6 years later, my next team was St George Dragons, where Brian, my brother, had left Illawarra, gone to Bradford Bulls, and then back to St George Dragons. And I was ready for a move from Illawarra, so I joined up with Brian at St George. And that was they probably were my first team, St George, mainly because my brother had played for St George. So when you've got somebody who's a professional sports person, your allegiances change. So wherever my brother played or coached, I became a fan of that team. So I didn't have that inbuilt and ingrained passion for one particular team. I'd jump around to wherever the blood was.
Oh, that's a shame. That is a shame.
Yes.
That's understandable. I mean, I think anyone would probably do the same. And you mentioned that he was into management. You obviously got into management. What was it that got you into it? Was there anything in particular that thought, I fancy a bit of that?
Yes. A number of things, but what I learnt from an early age, and I want to jump back to going from being a big fish in a small pond to being a small fish in a big pond when I went to Sydney. Once I got there, I realised that there was so many other players that were bigger, faster, stronger, and better, and more skillful than me. So I think I found a loophole in the system of professional sport in order to play first grade. I worked out that if I got in the team and got the people around me to play well, I was a better chance of getting selected again the following week. So it wasn't down to my own ability, it was down to the ability of the people around me. But if I could help them play well, that gave me my best chance of being selected again next week. So I often look back on it and refer to it as, I think I was a coach before I retired playing. I was actually doing more coaching on the field than I was playing. And, to the point where, some of my mates used to say, Smithy, you're pretty crap as a player, but geez, I love playing with you, because I could bring out the best in them and encourage them and get them to play well and do some of their thinking for them and do some encouragement when they needed it and give them a kick up the backside when they needed it on the field. And, so I think I had that ability to get good things out of the people around me before I retired. So when I had an opportunity to get into coaching, it was an easy one for me to, decide that that's what I wanted to do. Yeah.
You sound like the perfect halfback there, Tony.
Well, not quite. Perfect halfback knows exactly what pass to put on, and is, knows exactly how to take on the line. I wasn't as good at, some of the skills of the game, Ben, but I certainly knew how to read games, and I knew how to encourage other people to do good things. So, I had a bit of the gift of the gab on the field.
So you just said about your perfect halfback and how he knows how to put the right pass in. And as a halfback myself, I'm obviously watching him and a Leeds fan as well. I grew up watching Sinfield and Maguire and Super League in general. Who would be the best halfback that you worked with then as a manager and as a player?
Oh, that's tough. There've been some very, very good ones, and it's hard to single people out. But he probably wasn't the all-round classic halfback, and it's not just done on nostalgia what I'm about to say here. But I had a huge respect for Rob Burrow because of his abilities and size and his tenaciousness and his his toughness. I think, and he's pound for pound the toughest player I ever coached. He's the bravest. He wasn't your classic all-round halfback, and he had attributes that he played to and he excelled at, and he allowed other people around him to do some other things, which is a great attribute to have. But Rob's right up there in terms of one of my favourite all-time halfbacks. But and then I've had the pleasure of coaching the Kenny sort of halfback like Lee Briers. Lee Briers didn't have any of the attributes that Rob had, such as speed and such as bravery. He didn't have the same sort of bravery, but he was smart. He could read games and unpick teams, and tactically very, very aware. And and some of the kicking game that he had is second to none. And so I've had the pleasure of coaching many players, and it's hard to single people out.
Yeah.
And we talked about Rob Burrows there, and I think the world of rugby league really came together in that moment. And our thoughts still go out to his family. But a lot of your former players really rallied round and did some quite remarkable things. How does that make you feel, knowing that you know, have had a little impact in the way they've built their character, and that's, you know, how they're responding in that time of need?
Yeah, well, they had a big impact on my character also. If they were a terrific bunch, on the whole, and some incredible leaders within that group, and you know what they've done, and many of them have done. But Kevin Sinfield in particular is, no surprise to me. Just the extent of his leadership that he's shown and support of his teammate and his mate, and very, very strong and powerful. And listen, we learn from people like them, and I certainly did. So yeah, it was a pleasure working with people like that, and I've been very fortunate to have plenty of those sort of leaders and people who stand up for each other and look out for each other and go, the extra yard or extra mile or the extra marathon, when it comes to Kevin, for instance. But yeah, it's lovely and it's inspiring, and they inspired me.
Mm. Yeah, I think it did everyone. Yeah. So we're going back to when you did get into management and you got a call from the Japan team. Could you talk us through the process of becoming the head coach of the Japan national rugby league team?
Yeah, well, it didn't really actually happen. End up happening. I was assistant coach at Parramatta Eels at the time, and a mate of mine that I played with um, was involved with the Japanese team. I had been for some time, and he knew I was coaching at Parramatta as an assistant coach, and he asked me would I be interested in doing the Japanese job. I said absolutely, I'd love to. There was a emerging World Cup, pardon me, emerging World Cup coming up at the end of 2000, and he asked me would I go to Japan, meet up with the team, and then fly across to the UK and coach them in the emerging nations. And what a great experience that would be, having never been to Japan, and also then going on to coach the national team in England. So yeah, I jumped at it. So I'd agreed to do it and was all ready to go off to Tokyo to start a training camp when the job for the Huddersfield Giants became available. And I was going through an interview process to take up try to, get my name in the hat for the Huddersfield Giants job. And whilst I was doing that, and it was all by phone and fax messages, and in those days there was no, internet in the same way we have it now, and you can do online stuff. So I was interviewing over the phone and felt like I was being disadvantaged because other coaches were interviewing face to face with the Giants. So I made the offer to them that I'd jump on a plane on Monday and come over and interview for the job face to face on Tuesday, and if I didn't get the job, I'd fly back on Wednesday. And so they agreed to that, and I did that, and I interviewed, and I got the job Tuesday afternoon, and cancelled my flight back to Australia on the Wednesday, and rang my wife on Tuesday evening, and we had 2 children under 3, and a house and 2 cars, and I gave her the phone call to say, would you mind packing the house up and putting it into storage and selling 2 cars and getting the 2 kids on a plane and come over, and this is the next part of my career. And she's almost forgiven me for it now, but she loves it. She loves being here now, but it was all a bit of a whirlwind, if you like. So at that point in time, pardon me, I actually had to withdraw from coaching the Japanese team because I was taking on a full-time position at Giants starting immediately. And so I didn't end up being the Japanese coach. However, when they came over for the Emerging Nations World Cup, I went and hung out with them and gave the new coach a bit of assistance and gave him the Japanese players a little bit of insight into the British game and the British weather, and and try to help them through their campaign. It didn't go so well. The results weren't great for them, and I think the rugby league was a lot to be desired. But what a great group of people, and so yeah. To sum it up, I didn't actually end up being the Japanese coach after all that.
You talk about coming over to England, but your first experience of England was playing at Workington.
That's right.
How much did you have to adapt in terms of the weather and the way that the English game is, and how different is the English game to Australia as someone who's both coached and played over it?
Yeah. I'd actually not long retired from St. George and taken up a coaching position with a new team in Australia called the Adelaide Rams. They were only around for a few years, but I was part of the foundation year of the Adelaide Rams, and then the big war broke out between Super League and ARL in Australia. And I was down in Adelaide with no team to coach at that time because all the players had to go back to their original teams. So Brian was coaching at Bradford Bulls at the time, and he knew the coach at Workington. And he said, they're doing it a bit tough at Workington. Do you fancy coming out of retirement and coming over and playing? And I went, well, I've got nothing better else to do at the moment. So I did. It was a very big shock to the system, I'm going to say. Ben, it was culturally very different to Adelaide. Anybody who's been to Adelaide, it's a beautiful city in Australia, and beautiful weather and beautiful outlook. And then I was thrown into the midst of a Cumbrian, coming off the back of a Cumbrian spring it was when I arrived. And it was a bit of a shock to the system. Famously, they put me in a flat above a fish and chip shop in the middle of town, and that was my induction into Workington. And we're a team that won 3 games that season, and it was tough work. And when you talk about the standard of Workington to St. George, for instance, the 2 teams that I'd played for within a year, it was chalk and cheese. It was a real shock to the system, and it was. I look back on it with fond memories, but it was a tough time, and it set me up, I suppose. I knew that everything else in Britain was going to be better than my first experience when I came back.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, Yorkshire is the best county, as we all know.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm a Yorkshireman for 24 years now, so truly converted, Ben.
God's county.
Well, you say that, Ben, but you're an Oldham fan, and I think you'll find that's not in Yorkshire, buddy. But yeah, Lancashire, me, but we'll move on from that. But staying in Yorkshire, you talked about the Giants, and you had some ups and downs there. Could you talk us through your years at the Giants, please?
Yeah, sure can. Yeah, and talk about it fondly. I loved it. I'll tell you, when I took over officially for the last 2 games, I think it was, of the 2000 season. So we had 2 losses. And then we got to have a pre-season together. And we then started the 2001 campaign, at which point we lost the next 13 games. So my first 15 games as a head coach in this country all started with losses against my name. And then we had a draw as our first point on the board after 14 rounds. So things weren't looking great in terms of the league table, but it really reinforced my coaching philosophies, which is all about, my job is to improve individuals and the team. That's my job. That was my task. That was what I was employed to do. And the reason why I kept my job after so many losses was quite evident that the team was getting better. They were getting better. They weren't good enough at the time, and they actually, individually and collectively, they were getting better, and it was for everybody there to see. So much so that I'll tell you about the second half of the season. We once we got that first point on the board, we actually put our own league table on for the second half of the year. So our second half of the year, we started with 1 point. For the second half of the year, we came 6th out of 12. We actually came right up in the top 6. Unfortunately, the league wouldn't recognise our table, and we still finished last. But we gave it a really good shake, and we got relegated, and we went down the following year. The following year, we ended up having an undefeated season. We didn't lose a league game. We had 1 draw during that season. And what I will say to you, the first year of my coaching was much more enjoyable than the second. It taught me a whole lot about myself as a leader, but it taught me and reinforced the whole thing about performing well and improving. And we really did that the first year, much better than what we did the second year. We were way too good for the rest of the opponents in the second year, and we weren't always at our best as a team, and nor was I as a coach. So, yeah, it taught me that it isn't about winning and losing as a coach. I'm okay to get judged on that. People judge me on that, on whether my teams win or lose, but that's not really the criteria that I live by. And it was the criteria for me has always been, for my players to improve and the team to improve. So, but 2 very, very good years of learning as a coach, and I'm very grateful for those 2 very different years.
Well, and during your time at Huddersfield, you started the career of a Giants legend in Earl Crabtree, but you had him at centre in that season. What are your thoughts behind that?
He was a big young lad, and he was playing against men. He was 18, just turned 18, and hadn't really physically developed properly. He was large, he was tall, and he was going to be a big man, but to put Earl in the mix and against hardened, seasoned professionals, quite tough the championship back in those days too. A lot of players who had come down from Super League back into playing, pretty wily old men, and to put him up front or put him in the mixer in the middle, I don't think would have been fair on him at that point in time. Take him 10 years later, I started to feel sorry for the other team, but no, as an 18-year-old, he didn't have those capabilities, and nor would it have been fair on him to develop him. The reason also for centre, aside from getting him away from the mixer in the middle with hardened men, it helped him enormously for his agility. He had to learn to cope with agility and not just rely on his size as and running up and down on straight lines. He had to deal with opponents, pardon me, both offensively and defensively. That was going to help him develop some more skills that would help him later on in his career, was the thought. And I think that was good for him. And he probably, because of that, he got to play more regular rugby league. Had we have used him only in the forwards that year, I think Earl probably wouldn't have played much rugby league. He wouldn't have got picked in front of a lot of the other players. But as a weapon out in the centres, because of his size and and because of some of what his capabilities were. I think it helped him in his career. Whether he agrees with that, he probably won't. But that's for somebody else. But that was the rationale behind it. Yeah.
Nice. And you move on from Giants. We're going to talk about the team that are literally on our doorstep now, the Leeds Rhinos. That team. So you win. I mean, there's so much we can talk about with the Rhinos, but something I would like to ask is you win the World Club Challenge, and that's often recognised as being the best team in the world, let's say. How does it feel to say that you coached the best team in the world?
Yeah. 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 There are things to look back on, and it's nice. It's nice when you say that, but I don't know. You don't think about those things so much at the time. It's not about, it's about the people and the relationships that you make along the way. And it's nice that you get a team that's capable of achieving good things, and they do. So, equally, just like what I was saying about the Huddersfield Giants team in that we got relegated, but the second half of that season was as satisfying as anything else I've done in my coaching career, to see the improvements in them. But they are special, they some of those memories are special, and it was nice to be involved in that. I'll honestly say to you as well, I think the fact that we won to give us a chance to play in that World Club Challenge, to win the Super League the first year I was there, the first time for 32 years, I think, that they'd won. That was a pretty big thing. That was a pretty big thing for the club and the city and just to be involved in that. I'd probably put more on that because that's over a full season, and that's also you have to go through a finals campaign. A one-off game for mine wasn't, anything can happen in a one-off game. And it did in that game, by the way, that World Club Challenge against Canterbury. I think we were trouncing them at half time, and, we ended up coming home by the skin of our teeth. But, yeah, one-off games and you're involved in sport, it can go either way if things just happen to go your way or you pull out a performance. But to win a competition and to go through and win a grand final after a long campaign, I think is much more satisfying than one-off performances. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you had a Leeds squad full of absolute legends in the sport. Jamie Jones Buchanan, Rob, Danny Maguire, Kev. But you're also the coach that brought in Jamie Peacock. First of all, how on earth did you do that? And secondly, thank you very much for doing it.
Well, that's down to Gary Hetherington, more so than me. But, I think Jamie was ready for a change. He'd been at Bradford for a while and Bradford Bulls and done some pretty good things there. And I think there was always a bit of an ambition in the background, in the back of JP's head, that he wanted to play for Leeds one day. And but I do remember it happening, and where Gary brought Jamie for a meeting with me and asked both of us would we be interested in working together. And yeah, it was quite exciting, to have at that point in time he was England captain, want to come and play for us at Leeds Rhino, and for a chance for me to work with, a player who won numerous grand finals already and captain his country. What a privilege. So yeah, it was great times. And, to add him to so many other fantastic players that we had at Leeds Rhinos. And it was a bit of a shock, I think, for JP as well, where he'd been a pretty dominant figure at Bradford. And for him to come into our setup where there was many good leaders around him also, and it just gave him a chance not to have all that pressure on himself. He was able to, use the other leaders around him, and he probably didn't have that chance as much at Bradford once he'd been there for as long as he had.
And how do you combat the fact that you've got the England captain in JP and then you've got your own established captain in Kev? How do you combat that, or did it actually complement and work?
It most definitely complemented and worked. That's a lot down to JP too. Understanding that, and he had a great understanding. Kevin had been our captain for a number of years and was a fantastic captain. But I'm also equally going to put as much praise on Kevin as well. Of course, the whole period of time that Kevin was captain, it wasn't just about him. He was very, very, very good at getting other people around him to lead well. And during my time there, we had David Ferner and we had Matt Adams and we had, a vast amount of Andrew Doonham and more experienced players than Kevin. Ex-international Australians in our squad, and yet Kevin was captain. Kevin used their captaincy, their leadership very, very, very well. He didn't just see himself as the captain and sole leader. It was joint, and so many other players within that squad were leaders within the group, and he encouraged everybody to be a captain. As I did. I don't agree with just age and stage of careers. It's about, everybody needs to lead at some point in time, and everybody can lead, and if you allow them to. And Kevin was very good at that, and so was JP.
Excuse me.
And now, obviously, Leeds have announced that Gary Etherington's stepping down at the end of the season, and his replacement is Jamie Jones. Got any words about JJB for us? And
plenty. What a great guy! Really lovely, 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 lovely man. And he's a real competitor. He's a real competitor. He always was. Just on that, sometimes he and Kevin came through together and were very competitive in training with each other, and they were really good pals. Really, they got on so well off the field, but they'd have heated exchanges in training. Because they were so competitive, they'd almost fall out with each other over training because they just wanted to outdo each other or not let the other one get on top of them. It was so good. It was so good to see. And as soon as training would finish, they'd be fine again. But that's a little bit about JJB in terms of his competitiveness. But I think Ali Lauatiti had a huge influence on Jamie, and Jamie would probably tell you the same, I'd suggest. But, probably should let him tell his own story. But I think Ali helped him find himself spiritually, and I think that's been a good thing for Jamie as well. And I think he's become a more rounded person. He was competitive and probably let that get on top of him too much in his early days. But he developed into such a real gentleman and a really, thoughtful person and somebody who is always striving to get better. So, it was a pleasure. It's been a pleasure watching Jamie evolve. And if he does get the job, I wish him well. And I think he'd be very, very successful at it as well, because anything that he puts his mind to, he throws himself right into it.
Yeah, and when you're coaching these players, you see them firsthand. Do you get that inkling while they're still in their playing days that this guy could go on and coach? Is there anyone else that you thought this guy could really make it as a head coach after he's retired?
Yeah, there's been plenty of those. And there's some who you don't see it in, but they still become that. They still become a coach. Of course, you can learn. You can learn to be a leader. You can learn to be a coach. You can learn to be, a CEO. You can learn. It's not just some people have a natural tendency and have some attributes from an early age, but doesn't mean that's it. You know, we've all got the capabilities to develop and change and improve and learn how to be good leaders and good mentors, and you know that's everybody's capability. So yeah, sometimes we make some of those sort of calls of, yeah, I think he'll make a great coach, and I don't think he'll be so good. But you know, that's not a exact science, and it's not how it always turns out. So the other thing I'm going to say about that group of players back when I coached them, that group of players at Leeds had really strong. We had as a club really strong connections with Leeds Beckett, or Leeds Met it was back then, and the players were smart enough to take advantage of that too. We had, I think, at one stage we had 7 or 8 doing degrees, part-time degrees with the university. We also had other people that were, you know, doing other things in their careers outside of rugby league. They'll get themselves ready for after rugby league, smart. They were also, you know, well occupied, so they weren't getting caught up in other issues as much, you know, that young people can get distracted by. And you know, we had some issues at different stages. And that's always going to happen in society, and working with young people, make mistakes. But so many of that group got involved in education and bettering themselves. And I think we're up to about 85% of the squad were doing something really productive outside of their sport at the same time as playing their sport. So I'm not surprised that many of the people in that group have gone on to have successful careers afterwards.
Mm. No, yeah, I get that. And that's where me and Ben are representing Leeds Beckett. So we'll give a quick little shout out to Leeds Beckett Uni, just where we are now.
Got some good friends there, actually.
Yeah.
James Webster, a former assistant coach of mine, and a player that I admired. He works at Leeds Beckett at the moment, and I met up with him for a coffee, as I do from time to time, in the Leeds Beckett cafeteria. So we got Leeds Beckett in there a few times now.
Yeah.
Well, give us a shout and we'll go for a coffee with you then, Tony.
Love to, Ben.
Well, Ben, you've got the Leeds Beckett Rugby League got a grand final this week, haven't they? So
Yeah.
we'll wish your fingers crossed for them to make
Who are
it.
you playing, Ben?
It's against Northumbria Uni. They've won it. I think they're on 7 in a row in Northumbria, and 7
Oh,
finals against Leeds Beckett as well in a row.
wow.
So but this year we're currently 11 from 11, and yeah, the boys have just pulled their finger out this year, and
Good
I've
stuff.
unfortunately been injured for most of the year, so might not play, but I'm in part of the team and got to do my bit to help the team. So
Absolutely. Good man. Yeah. Well, best wishes from me. My daughter went to Northumbria, so I know that university well as well. But no, I certainly will be a Leeds boy come Wednesday.
thank you very much, Tony.
Yeah, good luck to Leeds Beckett Rugby League once again. So as we'll move on from Leeds Beckett, and we'll talk about when you became manager of Great Britain Rugby League, as it was then. Some obviously incredible talent coming through that team, and we'll get into that. But one man you brought into the squad was a certain Sam Burgess. So talk me through what you saw in him. I think everyone saw in him, but you particular as head coach, what did you see in him to bring him through and give him that chance?
Yeah. Sam's right up there for mine in terms of talent that I've coached, you know, in particularly British talent. Pardon me. Yeah, and just a good quality young man he was at the time. I'd worked with his father at Huddersfield. His father did Mark had done some scouting for us and worked with our junior boys, and so I knew his father pretty well, and he was a very good man, and so you know I'd seen Sam come through and his brothers, all his brothers, and so I knew a little bit about Sam prior to him, you know, selecting him, and I've watched him, you know, help his father, through MND and till his father passed. And whilst he was still a young man playing for Bradford Bulls at the time and making his way in professional sport and going home and bathing and feeding his father, and some qualities that were quite incredible, really. And so yeah, so that was aside from his rugby league, and what he was able to do and his capabilities on the rugby league field were obvious for all to see. And I think I knew he was going to be a special player and within his career. And so yeah, I gave him his first cap. The two Sams actually. Sam Tompkins was a kid at Wigan, and he hadn't played much first grade when I gave Sam his cap too, and two very special players. And though I was proud to be and honoured to have worked with them and been their coach. So yeah, it was. Yeah, I loved it. I loved aspects of being the national coach. The fact that it was only 4 or 5 games a year was a huge frustration for me, and something that I really struggled with, because there just wasn't enough international games to actually have an impact, and be able to influence the whole system too much. And at the time, I was begging them to let me coach a domestic team at the same time as being the England coach or in Great Britain coach, but they wouldn't allow me at that stage, unfortunately. So it made it an easy decision to get back into coaching on a weekly basis. And I just felt like I wasn't the best coach I could be by only having 3 or 4 games at the end of a season and getting players for a couple of weeks before you went into some of the biggest games of their careers. And so it was a mixed time for me in terms of my coaching and how we went about it. But we certainly had some good young players, many of which hadn't experienced the NRL or ARL. We had one at my stage. We had Adrian Morley. He was the only player that had experience in the NRL when I was coaching that team. From there, we had numerous. Gareth Ellis went over there and became a sensation. James Graham went over there. Sam Tompkins, Sam Burgess, and so many of them went on to gain great experience and development in the NRL and become terrific players. But we had them in the early parts of their career, and I think it certainly helps their development by going over there and playing in the NRL, and it helps them become better players.
And now Sam Burgess has obviously developed into a head coach at Warrington Wolves. They've had some interesting success over the last couple of years. They think it might be their year. Who knows? What do you make of what do you make of his transition into management?
Yeah, good. I think he did a great job last year and got a whole lot out of his team. And I'm not surprised that Sam had that capability. He's a very inspirational guy, and he treats people well. And I'm not surprised that he got a whole lot out of him. This second year is going to be they're all different, and he'll have learned a whole lot from last year, but the following season ends up being, another big challenge for him. And so yeah, he'll just keep on developing. He's going to have some ups and downs. One of the guarantees is in your coaching career is, if you're going to have a career, is that you're going to have plenty of ups and downs, and it's how you handle those times will determine how long you're around for. And I won't be surprised to see Sam around for a very long time.
Yeah. And you were talking then about International Rugby League and the fixtures and the way that they come out. And this might sound pointless, but would you want to see something like the Six Nations over here in England and the Northern Hemisphere for England, even though it won't benefit England in a way? because they'll just win every game? Or do you like the current format of having a team come over and tour in November, and then we'll play France in the mid-season?
Um, we don't have many options, is the answer, Ben. You're not going to be able to wave a magic wand and get six nations that are all capable of challenging each other. That's not where the game's at. We've got two teams that are, been dominant for the last 30 years in terms of New Zealand and Australia. And we've probably been third. That's all changed now since there's Tonga in also. Samoa hit the fold where a lot of the Australian players are going off and playing for them. But, we're not, the NRL are not going to have an interruption halfway through their season for anything other than New South Wales and Queensland. They're not going to, go to the International League throughout a season. It will always have to be done at the back end of a season, so they're such a big entity over there that whilst they like, I think, the idea of International Rugby League, they don't need it. They don't need it, so to put this concept of that we'd have a mid-year Six Nations, it just wouldn't happen. As much as some people may think that they'd like it, I think that'll be many, many, many moons off if it's ever going to happen. But what we do need to do, and I think Australia are aware of this, that we need to protect an international game and make sure that we keep developing the international game in the best way possible. And I think the introduction of a couple of other teams, such as Tonga and Samoa, have made it more interesting. Back in the time that I was coaching, as I said, there was, four nations really, and it was Australia by a fair bit, then just behind them New Zealand, and then us, quite a bit back, and then France way back further than that. So, and it's a difficult one to solve that problem. However, when you also mentioned the mid-year game against France, it's come under a lot of flack at different stages that having that fixture. I do feel that we need to take care of France and its development also. It's even though we're going to be a stronger nation in terms of that game, I think it's important for France to have an international fixture as well for them to develop. Now, back in the day that I was coaching them, I put out, a young emerging England team against France to give the young guys a taste of it from England and hopefully have a more competitive match for France also. So, some of those things need to be considered in order to keep developing the international game.
Mm. You talk about New Zealand being one of the dominant forces, though, but when you were GB manager, you went over and swept them.
They came here. They came
Okay.
here. Yeah, and we just come off the back of our season, and they travelled over. Yeah, no, it was. I'm not going to take the gloss off it and the shine of it. We beat them 3-0, but it probably wasn't at a period of time where they were at their best also. So I'm going to put it in context there. And whilst it's nice to look back and you guys were out of nappies then, but only just. I'm going to let you know that, the New Zealand tour that season wasn't, they weren't at their very best. And we had some of these young players coming through that were really hungry and they did a really good job. But, we were out and out third in the world at that period of time. And, occasionally you can come up against either New Zealand or Australia and have a one-off, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that in the World Cup. We came very close to beating New Zealand at one point, but we were out and out third best team in that competition.
I was about to ask you about that World Cup, and obviously going from being a GB manager to then obviously England. Being England manager as an Australian, how did that feel? As obviously in both countries it's raised that we don't really get on. So what was that feeling like?
Yeah, very proud. I was very proud. I became naturalized. I had to sit a test to become a British citizen. I became a British citizen at the end of 2008. Me and my family, my wife and I had to study a book and then go through a test in order to pass, and then swear allegiance to the Queen at that point in time. And yeah, listen, I understand exactly what you say about that. I'm very proud of my heritage. I'm very proud of where I was brought up and being Australian originally, but I'm very proud to be British too. And I didn't take that on lightly. And you know, I've been here for, as I said, 24 years, coming up to 25 at the back end of this season, this year, and I'm very proud of where I live and the country that I've represented as a coach, and I'm very pro-British and pro-English, and I think there isn't enough patriotism, I don't think. I think a lot of people almost apologise for being English and British, and I think that's wrong. I think we've got a country that should be proud of. It's a beautiful country and it does a whole lot of things good. There's some things in each of the countries that I've lived that there's some faults in as well. But there's plenty more strengths than there are weaknesses, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you. And sorry to make you feel old, but you've been in England longer than either of us have been alive. So yeah, sorry about that.
It's quite all right.
You then left the England and Great Britain jobs to join Warrington, where you had such a successful spell. Why Warrington? And then why could you not win it? Why was it cups only?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, why Warrington? Well, during my period of time at GB, England, it was. We had a function after a match, and where I just happened to have a chance meeting. I think it was after one of the New Zealand games that we won that series, and I had a chance meeting with Simon Moran, the owner at Warrington Wolves, and we just got on well in that meeting, and we had a chat, and that was about it. And little did I know, a couple of years later he'd be on the lookout for a head coach. Where things weren't going so well for his team, and he wanted to make some changes, and by that stage, I think a few people probably did his homework a little bit, and somebody said I might be able to change their fortunes and help them change their culture a bit. So I got a phone call from Simon to see if I'd be interested in coming and working at Warrington, and I went to the people above me. Richard Lewis was my boss at that stage, and I asked him and begged him, could I continue to be the England coach as well as coach Warrington Wolves? But that wasn't to be, and they made a decision that I had to be one or the other. So I wanted to desperately get back into club coaching. I didn't get the fulfillment of coaching on a regular basis when I was coaching at England, so I needed that, and so I took on the job, and went into Warrington, and we won the cup in the first year, and then the second year, and we started to change the fortunes of the club, and I think changed the culture of the club, which then gave us a chance to achieve some bigger things, such as winning, either the league leaders, which we did, and also a chance of winning grand finals. And we gave ourselves, during my time there, 2 or 3 cracks at the big one, and one in particular, stands out. Was the game against Wigan, where we were in command of the game and dominating the game for, the early most of the first half, till Joel Monaghan got injured, and it just took all the air out and momentum out of our sails, and yeah, that was our best chance of it out of the three that I was involved in, and but it's not to be. We gave it a shake, and we had a pretty good time doing it too. And made a whole lot of progress as a club and as a team, and you don't always get the result that you're after. That's part of sport, but it doesn't mean you don't keep trying for it. So we kept going, and yeah, hopefully Sam has picked up that baton and will continue on, and maybe this year will be their year. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
And I've been to Wembley as a rugby league fan twice. Once was in 2013 for the World Cup semi-final, which as an Englishman we won't discuss. And the other time was as a Leeds Rhinos fan in 2012. And talk us through that 2012 Challenge Cup, because you were absolutely phenomenal that day.
Wow. Well, I'm going to divert a bit. Wembley for me was my first experience, end of 1996, Bradford Bulls versus St. Helens, I think it was. And I came over. It was the last game at the old Wembley. So I was at 1996, I was at the last game at old Wembley. And then to go back there some years later to the new Wembley as, head coach of Warrington Wolves was quite special. So, listen, I do recall the game, but and we were pretty dominant. I think things clicked for us, but I can't. You could probably tell me more about that game than I can, Ben. And that's just a little bit of how I process games. I move on, and I do. I move on. We review games afterwards, analyse them, look at why we did well or not so well, what we can improve. But I put them to bed, it's probably a bigger memory for you than it is me. Do you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I've chosen to forget that game.
Well, yeah. I'll tell you what I remember more so. So I'd left Leeds Rhinos end of 2007. We won the grand final, my last game, bit of a fairy tale ending. And you can tell me what years the Rhinos went on to win for the next few years. But they were pretty much in everything, and I remember seeing Kevin Sinfield and talking to him on the field afterwards, shaking hands with him. And he was extremely upset because the Challenge Cup had been a bit of a bogey for you guys, and it had been, I lost a Challenge Cup final to Hull FC with the Leeds Rhinos down in Cardiff when we done.
2005.
Say again?
2005, that.
That's right. Yeah, and it had been eluding, Leeds Rhinos. It was the big trophy that they hadn't won. And I remember seeing Kevin and speaking to Kevin, a man who I've got so much respect for and I loved, as a player and as a leader and as a, just somebody who I'd been involved in. And he was incredibly upset, and he, was showing. And I just said to him, a couple of things that I said to him about it is, you guys are so successful. I understand why you're upset, but if you feel like it's never going to happen again, you might be right. If you feel like it could happen, you give yourself a chance for it to happen again, well, you might be right too. So it doesn't have to finish today. And, the fact that they weren't good enough that day and we were great, does that mean you're never going to win the Challenge Cup? So you can make even the biggest defeats temporary. Some of the biggest setbacks in your career can be temporary if you put it in your mind that way. And, I also reminded him also about something that I believe in is if you can't handle the defeat of a big game, don't compete and don't go in the big games. You're going to have it on Wednesday. You might be competing in, the highlight of your career. If it's going to be too much for you to lose it, stay at home. Stay at home. Forget about it. You know, you got to be. There's no guarantees when it comes to sport or life. You know, if you're going to put yourself out there and you're going to and this goes for being somebody that you want to be in life. If you're scared of what the outcome might or the failures, stay at home, sit on the couch and watch somebody else do it. You know, if you're actually not afraid to go out and fail, or the day isn't going to be yours sometimes, if you're not afraid of that, you'll end up being in more great days. You know, and I can remember having that conversation with Kevin on the pitch about some of these things. And when did they end up winning it, Ben? You'll be able to tell me now, because
Ended up winning it in 14, and then we did it back to back in 15 with the treble.
there, you guys got so greedy. I shouldn't have said anything. You shouldn't. I shouldn't have said anything to Kevin. And no, listen, you know, you guys got so used to winning so many things, and you know that's a good thing too. But you need to be able to handle it when it doesn't go your way too. And Kevin certainly was good at that too.
Mm. Yeah. You know, you talk really well about, you know, like moving on from games and that management of losses and defeats or wins or moments. Is there anything in your career that you might regret, you know, or are you happy living with no regrets?
Listen, we all make mistakes. I had thousands of them, loads and loads of them. I made heaps of mistakes along the way, and some things that I've had to put my hand up about and say it wasn't good enough. And you know, every time my team didn't win, it was my fault. No doubt about that. I was responsible. My job was to get them to play well and play well enough to win games when they were capable. So yeah, plenty of not regrets so much. There's some things that I wish would have happened. You know, I think you mentioned the grand final. You know, at against Wigan, or I did earlier. That would have been great. You know, I would have loved to have won a grand final during my time with Warrington, but it's not to be. But it's not a regret either. There's some things that don't happen in your life that you wish did. You know, when you wish you had have found a way or been able to be better to overcome some of the things that get in your way. But just on the regret part of it, you know, I've made some decisions that have proven to be wrong plenty of times. But I'd like to think that the majority of those decisions I've made were based on the information I had at that period of time and done for the right rationale. They may end up being wrong, but I did them for the right reasons, if that makes some sort of sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they were right decisions. We can all, you know, hindsight's fantastic afterwards, and I've done it many times with my coaches and my teams and gone, well, I thought, and this is why I thought that, but I was wrong. I should have gone a different direction. I put my faith in this, or I thought this would happen and it didn't. So that's on me. So there's plenty of those. I don't know if I regret them. You know, yeah. There's probably a few things in my personal life that, you know, I regret. Some of the not going home an hour earlier, and some of those other things that we do as young men and young people and older people sometimes, where you should make a decision to go home a little earlier or have one less drink, or I have those sort of regrets that the rest of us in normal society have as well.
Well, as you said, hindsight's got 20/20 vision. But one thing that you can't regret on it is giving Ben Curry the start of his career. And for a player that's come on the way he has, England international, World Cups he's played for Warrington for ages now. When you're giving a player like him their debut, do you feel like part of their career is down to you and the fact that you've kickstart their career?
It's not down to me, but I'm proud to be part of their career. You know, yeah, absolutely. but I don't take credit for anything in their career in terms of they make that happen. They
Yeah.
make that happen. But I love, one of my pleasures has always been handing over a new cap to a player, whether that be for England or whether that be for a club team. It's great. I can remember my first game and how special it was for me. And most of us who get a chance to do that have grown up with that dream, of I want to be this one day. So it's exceptionally special. That first game of fulfilling some aspect of your boyhood dream. So yeah, I'm very honoured, and Ben Curry's one of many I've had a chance to do that with, and what a lovely young man he was from the start. And I'm so happy for him to have such a long and prosperous career, and and handle it the way he has. And he's had some ups and downs, some injuries, some tests, and along the way, which every person that has a successful career, and he's handled those tough moments really well. And he's come through the other side, and probably playing some of his best rugby league that I've seen, in recent times.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And what he's done for England especially, and at Wire now, I think he's just been phenomenal recently.
Yeah, agree. There's another one for you. You mentioned Earl Crabtree earlier. I played Ben Curry in all sorts of positions too as a young guy for some of the similar sort of reasons, to get him out of the mix of the forwards at certain times. But I used him in the halves, and I've used him in the centres. And Ben's just one of those players who, he's got a whole lot of attributes, and but also we nurtured him and made sure we didn't bring him on too soon, and which is a good thing. I mean, he's had a long and prosperous career because of that, I think, too.
Yeah, we've talked quite a lot about players that you've had the privilege and pleasure to work with and whatnot. If possible, do you reckon you could whittle it down to the best talent you coached, not necessarily the best skill set maybe, but then also the best bloke you coached? Maybe not the best player, but one that you thought a really good person.
There's too many for me to do that. There's so many. I've had some.
We'll take top three, Tony.
Top three. Put it this way: I recently got asked in a podcast to list my best 13. And I said no, I can't do that. I'll give it top 17. So I gave a 17, and I left out so many people that I wanted to put in that team for so many different reasons. It's really difficult. I've always avoided doing it because when I do, I always think afterwards, oh, I'd have him as well. Oh no, I'd have him. There's just so many. But I'm just going to talk a couple of special. Kevin Sinfield. I'll tell you that if I was ever going to build a team at club level, he'd probably be the first person I'd pick, and put him as captain or co-captain. And the reason I say co-captain is in that 17 that I just spoke about. The other guy that I'd have as the co-captain is Sean Kenny Dow. Sean Kenny Dow came over when I was at Hull KR. He'd not long been over when COVID was just breaking out, and I was living he and I lived about a 4-minute walk from each other, and his partner had just gone back to Australia to visit her family. So bearing in mind this young man who's had a terrific career comes over to Australia, gets locked down in his house by himself with his dog Marco. And so each day during this period of time, and he's on his own, he's out walking Marco, he'd walk past my house and slip into my backyard and down into the back garage where we had a table tennis table, and we play table tennis most days during COVID. We kept each other sane. We helped each other so much at a point in time where it was really tough and lonely for him. And we become very, very close in terms of got to know each other tremendously well, and what a fantastic human being he is. So those two I rank very, very highly in terms of people, and also I'd make him a captain of my all-time best team. So on talent, I can't go too far past. Sam Burgess has been one of the most talented. There's other people that I'd mention for other reasons, but Sam was right up there in terms of talent.
I noticed there that the first thing you did was look at captaincy there. What to you makes a good leader?
People who can inspire other people by various ways, by their deeds as well as by what they say and by the way they treat people. Yeah, very important. The leaders within a group make or break it. I've only ever been successful when I've had really good leaders within my teams. If the leaders aren't great, nor is the team, as a whole. So yeah, quality of people, great leadership. Great leaders care about each other. They care about their team. They care about each other's performances. They get people to care about the purpose of the team, why you're doing it. That's what good leaders do, and they become contagious. Their outlooks become contagious. And that's why I also said it, inspire. Great leaders inspire people, and they're important for success. If you have leaders within your group that don't inspire people, they actually do the other one. They frustrate people. It's either frustrate or inspire. And when it comes to team sports, you need people who can inspire each other. When it comes to any sort of business, you need people who can inspire those around them.
You touched there on your time at Hull KR and the start of the pandemic and everything. One player that I would love to talk about is probably arguably one of the best players in the world right now, Mikey Lewis. Did you always know that he was going to be the talent that you thought he was going to be?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Yeah, I think he's tremendous ball runner. He's tremendous at he's always going to be very, very dangerous carrying the ball. He's exceptional at it. Exceptional. There's other aspects of his game that have improved enormously. And I think Willie Peters has been terrific for him, being another halfback, and and having to deal with size and having to deal with how to manipulate teams and kicking game as well. I think that's a big improvement in Mikey. I see a lot of development still in Mikey as well. I think he's terrific in many aspects. There's some areas that he still needs to develop to make him as good as he's going to be. But as long as he's got that desire to keep learning and keep improving, I've got no reason not to believe that he can't keep on developing. But I think we've only seen a bit of Mikey yet.
Wow, that's not good for Super League. Well, it is good, but it's not.
Well, it is. We want special players, don't we?
Yeah.
We want exciting players. But there's many facets of Mikey's game that needs to develop too. Yes, he is very good, but there's aspects of it. And that's what I'm saying. I think, if he develops those, he'll be super. At the moment, he's very good. but if he develops some of those other aspects of his game and keep, focusing on those, that's when he can be outstanding and something that we all marvel at. But yeah, he's developing well.
Yeah. So here on the Sporting Blueprint podcast, we always end with 3 questions for everyone. So we'll delve into them. So the first one is for you, for you growing up on that dairy farm as you were younger, to now, and you look back at your career, what does it feel like for you to say that you were a part of the elite world of sport? You managed nations, some of the biggest clubs in the world. What does it mean to you to say that you were in that elite level of the sporting world?
Yeah, very privileged, very honoured to have achieved some of my dreams.
Mm.
Some of my dreams, what I wanted to do when I was growing up, and very fortunate. That's for sure. I'd like to think a lot of it was down to a lot of hard work, but also, good fortune, having good people around me, and I've been fortunate to be able to learn from so many great people, and both those who I've coached and also others that have coached me along the way. So yeah, very, 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 very fortunate, and grateful for that. And sometimes we tend to forget those things and focus on some other aspects of our life that aren't near as important. And so yeah, very grateful that I've got a happy and healthy family that have been on this journey with me, and I'm grateful for their support and sacrifices along the way too, because there's been plenty for them along the way in that respect as well. So that doesn't go unnoticed by me as well.
Fair enough. And our second question here would be, if you're sat opposite a young Tony Smith starting out, what would be the one piece of advice that you'd give him?
Keep learning. Keep asking questions. Keep learning. Just yeah. When you do that, just that creates opportunities, for the future. But just keep doing that. I was always very inquisitive as a kid and questioned things, and I think that's been good for me. There's not much I would change about that aspect of giving advice over. And there's not many mistakes along the way that I would have changed. It makes you, it shapes you. There's been some ups and downs and highs and lows, so I wouldn't change too many things, Ben.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And our final question of the 3 is, we always ask that if you were to picture yourself in our shoes and you can try and, pick the brains of anybody, maybe past or present in sport, you can sit down and really delve into them. Who would you like to sit down and pick the brains of?
For you guys or for me?
For you.
Wow, once again, there's so many. There's so many leaders and managers and people in sport and out of sport that I'm fascinated by. Oh, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can narrow it down to just one. I'm fascinated about leadership and people that lead well. I'm going to put down to somebody I haven't met who really inspires me nowadays. Hopefully might get to hear him speak in a couple of weeks' time, in a few weeks' time. A guy, he's a successful businessman in America, and his name is Gary V. Or you heard of Gary V? Vaynerchuk. Vaynerchuk, I think his name is. It's hard to say it without having an American accent. But say again. Is that how you say it?
I don't know, mate. I was just laughing at the American accent.
Gary V. No, he's helped me and inspired me in recent times. some of the essence of what he's about is he tries to be a good person and he tries to help people and gives good advice away. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. He knows he's not everybody's cup of tea, but he just does his best. And anybody who doesn't really, buy into him, he's not too worried about. And that's probably the only bit of advice I would have given myself when I was a bit younger is don't care so much about what other people think about you. Do what you think is right. Lead the life that you think you should lead. Listen to those people who you should listen to, but don't listen to the others. Don't listen to the people out there who are negative. If they're close to you and you respect them, listen to them, even if they're negative, because they might be giving you some good advice. But those you don't know and don't trust and don't have any respect for, don't listen to them. Get on with it. And it's probably something that I would tell myself when I was younger, to listen to those that are more important, those that are important to you, and not worry about the ones who aren't.
Yeah, very, very strong, and I like that. And it's a real testament to you when we ask you these questions about, could you name one, or and you always say, I can't pick, and I think that obviously testament to your career and what you've done. So we both like to say thank you for your time as well, Tony.
My pleasure.
Love speaking to you, so thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, guys. I wish you both well. I love what you are doing, and keep spreading the message and going well. Don't worry about the knockers. Keep forging ahead there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and we'll catch you for that coffee, Tony.
Absolutely.